Joshua 10. Okay, so the Israelites have made a covenant or an agreement, a league with the Gibeonites. They've been tricked and they've entered into this agreement with them. Well, Joshua 10 says as soon as that happens, of course, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, right? And that's what we're going to see happen now. So in verse 1 it says, "Now it came to pass when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, had heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and to her king, so he had done to Ai and her king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, that they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, as one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all the men thereof were mighty." Now that's interesting to me. So this city is a mighty city. These are powerful warriors. It's a big city. They've got a big army, and yet they went and made terms with Joshua because they were afraid. And so one of the bigger cities in the area has made terms with the Israelites. And so Adonizedek, he comes up with a plan. So it says in verse 3, "Wherefore Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, sent unto Hoham, king of Hebron, and unto Piram, king of Jarmuth, and unto Japhia, king of Lachish, and unto Debir, king of Eglon, saying, Come up unto me, and help me, that we may smite Gibeon. For it hath made peace with Joshua and with the children of Israel." Uh-oh. So what's amazing is they're not saying, let's unite together to fight against the Israelites. They're saying, let's go whip Gibeon. See, now they probably, if given enough time, would have tried to get Gibeon to join in confederacy with them. And Gibeon probably considered that. And as the biggest city, maybe they had already sat around and talked about that and said, hey, we could get Lachish and Jerusalem and Eglon and all these cities together to fight against Joshua. And they knew that that would never work. And so the Gibeonites had gone and tricked Joshua. And as a result of that, now the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of mentality takes place. And now all of these cities come together. So what you had in that day was you had these city-states. And so each one of these cities has its own king, and each one of these cities is going to gather the inhabitants of the city and the surrounding area, and that's their little armies, and they're going to come confederate these 5 kings. So verse 4 says, "Come up unto me and help me, that we may smite Gibeon, for it hath made peace with Joshua and the children of Israel. Therefore the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, the king of Eglon, gathered themselves together and went up, they and all their hosts, and encamped before Gibeon and made war against it." So they're going to war against one of their neighboring cities. They're just going to completely ignore Joshua and the Israelites, or they're going to try to. So we're going to try to take a look at a map tonight and see if we can't kind of follow what's going on. So I had this turned on. Give me just a second. I emailed this out to you, so if you got your smartphone, you got it on there as well. If it's hard to see, I'll do my best here. All right. So we're just north of the Dead Sea. There's Jericho right there. All right. Here's Jerusalem. And here's Lachish. Here's Eglon. Here's Gibeon. And so you have these cities here, Jerusalem, Lachish, Hebron, Eglon, these cities all coming together, and they're going to go to war against Gibeon. Now Joshua is right up here at Gilgal, so just north of the Dead Sea. And so this is what happens as they gather together, and they come to war against Gibeon. So it says there in verse 6, "The men of Gibeon sent unto Joshua to the camp at Gilgal, saying, Slack not thy hand from thy servants, come up to us quickly, and save us, and help us. For all the kings of the Amorites that dwell in the mountains are gathered together against us." So this is what happens when you're someone's ally. when you have made a treaty with another city or country or whatever, and they need help, what do? Well, you drop what you're doing and you go help them. And it's interesting to me, even though they were tricked, they entered into this covenant with them, and it is binding. And so Joshua made the Gibeonites his servants. But even in doing that, now that they are being attacked, he is going to respond to this attack. And so it says, they call for help, and it says, come up and save us and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites that dwell in the mountains are gathered together against us. Verse 7, so Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valor. Now, remember his big mistake at Ai. Anybody remember what the mistake was? What did he not do? He didn't pray. He didn't ask God's direction, right? But as he gets word from Gibeon, look at verse 8. The Lord said unto Joshua, fear them not, for I have delivered them into thine hand. There shall not a man of them stand before thee. Joshua therefore came unto them suddenly, and went up from Gilgal all night. All night long, they go from Gilgal right here, over here to Gibeon. And it's 10 miles, we'll say. But at night, with an army. And what's interesting is there's an old book about the wars of the Bible. And this is one of the battles that's pointed out, this battle at Beth Horon, for a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons is Joshua's response to this situation. Now, these 5 kings have already assembled. So you have a mighty city at Gibeon, but you've got these 5 kings and their armies assembled against it. And Joshua comes, and he comes at night. So when the sun comes up the next morning, there they are. And so he carries out this night march, which would have been, just think about it. You know, if you've, June is coming up, and the D-Day is coming up. And if you haven't ever done any studying on that, you ought to. Largest invasion at its time that had ever been even attempted. Air, sea, multiple situations, multiple fronts, all coordinated in a surprise attack. Operation Overlord. And that's kind of what Joshua does here. They go at night. They travel all night to get there and to be ready. Now, if you walked all night long, would you be ready to fight when the sun came up? You'd probably be wanting to take a nap when the sun came up, right? So I want you just to think, just as we talk about this, I want you to think about what these men were like. You know, when the Bible talks about these guys being mighty men, you know, it's not kidding. I mean, these guys are going to fight. They're not going to shoot rockets and missiles at each other. They're going to fight in hand-to-hand combat with spears and swords and slings and bows and rocks and fists, and they just marched all night long to get there to be ready to fight. And so obviously God is with them. And this word from the Lord that God gives in verse 8, there shall not a man of them stand before thee, right? And so they're fired up. They're ready to fight. They're going to fight these people anyway. You know, they got this big mop-up operation. They're going to fight all the people of the Amorites. So to go and defend the Gibeonites, well, hey, we got 5 cities all piled up in one place. Let's just go wipe them out all at one time, right? So here they go. And it says in verse 10, the Lord discomfited. Man, of all the King James words, I love that one. Discomfited. It sounds very British, doesn't it? They were discomfited before them. That means he whooped them. The Lord discomfited them before Israel. Please notice who gets the credit for this battle. The Lord does, right? He says, and he slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon. So the sun comes up, all these 5 kings are gathered together. Here's Joshua and all the Israelites between them and the city of the Gibeonites. The Gibeonites fight right alongside the Israelites, and they wiped them out. And they chased them from along the way that goeth to Beth Horon, and smote them to Azekah and to Makkedah. Okay, so they're here at Gibeon, and they are going, when they flee to the west and the south. Here's Azekah, and here's Makkedah right here. So if this is 10 or 12 miles, they go at least 10 or 12, 15 miles, maybe 20 miles as they try to escape back. They're heading back to their cities. That's where they're going. They're trying to get home. And the Israelites are pursuing them. They're chasing them. Verse 11, it came to pass as they fled from before Israel and were in the going down to Beth Horon, that the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah, and they died. And there were more which died with hailstones than they which the children of Israel slew with the sword. Now here's what's fun. I love chapter 10 of Joshua because there's miracles in it. And anytime you have miracles in the Bible, you have scientists try to tell you how this was some kind of a natural occurrence rather than some kind of a miracle. So one of the things that a lot of people bring up is these great stones from heaven were meteorites. Okay? And it says pretty clearly that they were hailstones. Now, about a year ago, give or take, we had quite a hail here in San Angelo. And y'all remember some of those hailstones. Had you been out in that, it would not have been real good for you. Some of those things as big as baseballs, softballs, and they're not round, are they? They look like jacks, They look like jagged pieces of rock. They've got points and crazy edges on them, and remember the divots that they left in the ground as they hit, right? Well, those were, yay, so big. Just imagine if you had some that were big as the hood of a car maybe falling. But here's what's amazing. I mean, I can't tell you how many people. I studied a whole bunch of different sources for this as I was looking at this, just out of curiosity, what would people say? And I can't tell you how many people try to come up with some kind of a natural occurrence that would have caused this great hail. Now, you tell me, when was the last time that you were in a hailstorm that hail could tell the difference between an Israelite, a Gibeonite, and an Amorite? Because no Israelites get killed in this deal. And they're pursuing them. So, at some point in this process, just like God did in Egypt with the plagues, God draws a line. And I don't know if it's as they're pursuing them and the Amorites are way out in front of them and they're chasing after them, and all of a sudden, wham, 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 and the Israelites pull up and begin to wait and watch. But at some point, massive hailstones begin to fall that wipe this. Now, it says there was a great slaughter at Gibeon. That means the Israelites and the Gibeonites, they killed a bunch of Amorites there. And yet the hailstones that get them kill more than the sword of the Israelites and the Gibeonites back at Gibeon. So I don't understand why people are so adamant to try to explain away the miraculous. God told them, remember verse 8, fear them not, for I have delivered them into thine hand, there shall not a man of them stand before thee. Why is it so hard for us to believe in a God who speaks this world into creation that he can't cause giant hailstones to fall that can tell the difference between Israelites and their enemies? If God's chunking them, he's got pretty good aim, right? So obviously this is miraculous. This is not but look how God does it. He uses hail to do it. We've already seen that he had used bees to chase them out in certain areas. He's going to talk to a prophet through a donkey. He's going to use a whale to swallow a man and to transport him to a certain place. God is going to use this natural world, but he's going to intervene in ways that show that he is sovereign over it. And here's the lesson. If the lesson of AI is don't make decisions without praying about them and seeking God's direction, and if the lesson of Jericho is to be obedient to God and to realize that my selfishness affects other people, well, the lesson of Beth Horon is this, that God fights for his people when they're about his business. And it's fantastic as you think about this. Boy, don't you know, they marched all night. Then they have this massive battle at Gibeon. And now they're having to run the enemy down. And I'm pretty sure they're probably tuckered. God says, sit back. I'll rest you. Watch this. And he starts chunking these giant hailstones down upon them. And the Lord discomfited them. And it says in verse 12, then spake Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. It gets better. And he said in the sight of Israel. See, not only are they tuckered and not only is God resting them, but they're not done because God said he's going to wipe them all out and the sun's about to go down. They're running out of time. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that. You had more to do than you had day. Well, they don't have fog lights and night vision goggles and all of that kind of stuff. So they kind of need the sun in order to carry on what they're going to do. And so it says that he says, in the sight of Israel, sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still and the moon stayed. This is taking place. So here's Gibeon. And this is the valley of Ajalon here to the west. And then Azekah, Makeda, Libnish, Lachish, and Eglon. So they're trying to come back to the south and the west, back to their cities. They catch up with them in here. But right here in this area of the world is what we're talking about. And Joshua asked God to cause the sun to stand still and the moon to stand still. And so it says, verse 13, the sun stood still and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and hasted not to go down about a whole day. I don't know if that's 12 or 24 hours. I don't guess it really matters. But let's just stop for just a minute. So many problems with this. This is one of those places where people come and they say, we want to see scientific evidence of this. And so there is an anecdotal story that the Jet Propulsion Laboratory has done tests and can show that the calendars are off by 12 hours or so many hours and all this. I don't think that's true. I think that's some really zealous people trying real hard to come up with something. I've heard that for years and years and years, but I really don't think that's true. I know enough about the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, i.e. NASA, to know that they don't want anything in the Bible to be true, so there's no way they'd be helping anyway. But nonetheless, what happened here? Well, let's just think about it for a minute. First of all, it says sun stand still. So somebody tell me what's wrong with that. It's unscientific. Why? Because the sun is not moving, we're moving, right? So in order for the sun to stand still from our perspective, it means the earth has to stop. What would happen if the earth were to stop? Well, for one thing, you're traveling, supposedly, at almost 1,000 miles an hour, going around and around and around. So if the earth were to stop so that the sun stopped in the sky, you'd go, so would the ocean. Do you know the tsunami that would be caused if the earth were actually spinning at over 1,000 miles an hour and were to stop? Just think about it. I mean, it's gravity and all those things are in effect and everything's working like it's supposed to, and the moon's going around the earth and the earth's going around the sun and it stops. Well, you know how it goes. I mean, you know why we're supposed to wear a seatbelt, so you don't go through the windshield when you come to a really abrupt stop, right? So if you weren't tied to the earth, there's no way that would have helped Joshua if that had happened. So, what happened? I don't know. Either the earth is flat and the sun and the moon go around and around and around like this, which I'm leaning more and more that way every day. Okay, maybe not. I'll take my tinfoil hat off for a minute. Then maybe, oh, by the way, anytime the Bible talks about, my kids they're dying. For the last 2 weeks, our lunch discussions have been about a flat earth ideology. And they think it's ridiculous, but I can bring up a whole list of stuff about this long that they can't give me answers to. And so it's been real fun. Anyway, the Bible always talks about a heliocentric earth. Okay, this is one of the reasons why Copernicus, Galileo, the church, and science, and all of that. This is one of the reasons why 1,000, 1,500 years ago we have these huge debates about all of this kind of stuff, because from when you read the Bible, it says that we're here, that stuff's out there. The sun comes up and the moon comes up and it goes down, which is exactly what you experience from your perspective, right? So from our perspective, we see a sun that comes up, crosses the sky, goes down. We see a moon that comes up, crosses the sky, goes down. Stars that go around the North Pole, and we shift as the seasons go through their path, right? So there's a couple of things that could have happened. One, God just stopped time. Just stopped it. Scientists like to call this an event horizon. Really goofy movie about it. I don't recommend it. But it would just be for all of time in the entire universe to stop. Would that be hard for God to do? Well, of course not. I mean, casting down giant hailstones, saving my soul, creating the earth from nothing but a word, the cosmos, sun, moon, stars, by simply speaking a word, God could just stop time. And I don't know why anybody has a problem with that. I have never, ever had a problem with that. And so that's what it would have looked like from Joshua's perspective. The sun would have stopped in the sky. And time would have stopped except for that particular valley. Maybe the people that are underneath Joshua on the other side of the world, they're just going, hey. And for a whole day they just stopped because they weren't part of this battle, weren't part of this deal. I don't know. It doesn't say. There are anecdotal stories about a long night in places in the world as well. Can you believe them or trust them? And could we line up the timing? I don't know. Some people have tried to do that. To me, I don't see the need to do that. But that's one of the things that could happen. Something else that could have happened is there could have been a pole shift. And science, some fringe science tells us that there is a question that maybe there's been pole shifts, axial adjustments and tilts, and even complete pole shifts in the Earth's magnetic, electromagnetic, whatever, the Van Allen belts at different points in the past. And it's one of the things that people have brought up to try to explain some of the things that they observe as they study the Earth. But if you think about the North Pole or in the Arctic, you know, there's times that there's no sun, and then there's times that there's sun all year long, right? Based on the tilt. So if God were to have just adjusted the tilt just a little while, that part of the northern hemisphere would have experienced a long day. I've been in Russia where the sun, it would have been like about being halfway up in Canada, and the sun would go down, but it was just down. You know, I mean, it was just underneath the edge of the horizon. And so at 2 o'clock in the morning, it looks like, you know, the sun looks like it's going to come up from about 10 o'clock at night till about 4 in the morning, and it's really hard to sleep. And then it just is up all day, you know. So if God had taken and just allowed the earth to shift just a little bit on its axis, I mean a little bit, well, you could have just kept the sun and it could have just kept going. And same with the moon. So axial tilt, some kind of adjustment there. There's a neat theory. I'll throw it out there for you for those of you that are interested. And that is that, you know, the planets all have elliptical orbits. Us too. They're not circular orbits. So it's kind of like those stretchy hands, you know, that you get out of the little gumball machines. So you swing and it stretches and then whoo, and then it comes back and it stretches, zoom, and it stretches and then zoom. And so if you think about an elliptical orbit, it's moving faster the closer it is to the object of gravity. So the sun's here, so it's faster here, it slows down, and then speeds up as it comes by and then slows down. So it looks like that. Now you take different planets with different elliptical orbits and let those giant bodies in space come into close contact with each other. Like, for instance, Mars. There is a chance that every so many 100 or 1,000 years that Mars is at a place that's close to the sun at the same time that the Earth is a place that is close to the sun, and the Earth could be caught in between Mars and the sun, which could cause a shift in those magnetic things. So if you must have science explain this to you, that's a path that you might want to pursue. Let me also throw out there a guy named Hugh Ross. I don't agree with Hugh Ross on very much. He is a Christian, but he is an old earth creationist, and he doesn't believe in a universal worldwide flood. So he and I are done at that point. I'm a young earth creationist, and the Bible says the whole earth was flooded. Hugh Ross explains this away by saying that there was a miracle that God produced light in this valley for them to continue to fight while the rest of the world just went on like normal. So, take your pick. From where Joshua was standing, the sun stopped, and it sat there for either 12 or 24 hours, and it didn't move, and the moon stopped. We just had a day like that just before the big full moon that we had, where the sun and the moon were both in the sky at the same time, and you could see them both, and they were both full, or right at full, almost full, and it was beautiful about a week ago, because Wendy and I were talking about it. The sun was right over here, the moon was right over there, and it was, it was really cool looking. You have those kind of days sometimes. They stopped. And the reason that they stopped is because Joshua prayed, and because God listened. And the Bible actually tells us that this is what happened. Nobody's ever seen anything like it before. It's never happened again. He says the sun stood still, the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Jasher? Now, what is the book of Jasher? Oh, no, we're missing a book of the Bible, right? Well, no, but this means the book of the Zaddik, or the upright one. And you can buy one. You can order one offline, or go to a bookstore and get the book of Jasher. And should it be considered scripture? No, but the Bible actually mentions it several different places. And so just out of curiosity, I looked it up just to see what the book of Jasher says about this, to see if it adds anything. And guess what? It says almost exactly the same thing. It's almost as if it was copied straight out of the Bible. And so it's interesting to me. The Bible mentions it, but since we don't have it, do we need it? Well, no, and when I look at it, it doesn't add or take away anything from it. It just basically says exactly the same thing. The point is that in the people's day, when they were reading this book of Jasher, it was there. Now, whether the thing that we have that you can order today is the same as what they had, I don't know. I don't have any idea. But it basically just references this. And it says that nothing like this has ever happened. Verse 14, there was no day like it before it or after it that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. And so it's a miracle. It's a miraculous situation that takes place. And God, I believe God stopped time. I think if you ask me what I think happened, I think Joshua prayed and God said, get them. And he just pushed the pause button, except for what was taking place there in that valley. Or maybe for humans all over the earth. But the planetary movements, the cosmic movements, the stars, the comets, everything just stopped. And I have no problem at all with that. To me, it's one of those things that just reminds me of how incredible our God is. He is in control. He holds it all. By him all things consist, the book of Colossians says. So it says, verse 15, and Joshua returned and all Israel with him unto the camp at Gilgal. But these 5 kings fled and hid themselves in the cave at Makkedah. And it was told Joshua, saying, the 5 kings are found hidden in a cave at Makkedah. And Joshua said, roll great stones upon the mouth of the cave and set men by it for to keep them. Stand ye not, but pursue after your enemies and smite the hindmost of them. Suffer them not to enter into their cities, for the Lord your God hath delivered them into your hand. It came to pass, when Joshua and the children of Israel had made the end of slaying them with very great slaughter, till they were consumed, that the rest which remained of them entered into fenced cities. And all the people returned to the camp to Joshua at Makkedah in peace. None moved his tongue against any of the children of Israel. Then said Joshua, open the mouth of the cave and bring out those 5 kings unto me out of the cave. Can you notice the difference between where they are now and where they were in the wilderness? None moved his tongue against the children of Israel. No murmuring, no complaining. I mean, this is an army. Think about that. It's an army who marched all night long and had this big For those of you who've been in the service, imagine a huge operation where everybody was so tired they couldn't even move when it was all over, and nobody was griping. I mean, that's a miracle in and of itself. And so it says there, they brought the 5 kings out of the cave, and they did so and brought forth those 5 kings unto him out of the cave, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Yarmouth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon. And it came to pass when they brought those kings unto Joshua, that Joshua called for all the men of Israel and said unto the captains of the men of war, which went with him, Come near, put your feet upon the necks of these kings. And they came near and put their feet upon the necks of them. And Joshua said unto them, Fear not, nor be dismayed. Be strong and of good courage. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? That's exactly what God told Joshua. For thus shall the Lord do to all your enemies against whom you fight. I want you to think about the significance of this. I mean, when you're in the presence of a king, I mean, you bow down, you kiss the ring, you don't look him in the eye, you're at a lower level than he is. You use the right speech. If you don't use the right speech, you're going to be banished or killed or whatever. And they take these guys and they come and they put their foot on their neck. And it's just a demonstration of the Israelites subduing and discomfiting all of these people. And it says, this is what God's going to do to all your enemies. And afterwards Joshua smote them and slew them and hanged them on 5 trees. And they were hanging upon the trees until the evening. And it came to pass the time of the going down of the sun. Once again, earth perspective. The sun goes down, right? That's what we all see. That Joshua commanded, and they took them down off the trees, cast them into the cave wherein they had been hid, and laid great stones in the cave's mouth, which remain until this very day. So they did bury them. They didn't leave them exposed on those trees, but they are cursed. Remember, anybody who's hanging on a tree is cursed. And so they show this cursedness by hanging them on the trees until sundown. And it's humiliating to the enemy, but it's very, it's encouraging to the victors, because this is what they've done to their kings. And so verse 28 says, In that day Joshua took Makkedah and smote it with the edge of the sword, and the king thereof he utterly destroyed them, and all the souls that were therein he let none remain. He did to the king of Makkedah as he had done unto the king of Jericho. Then Joshua passed from Makkedah, and all Israel with him unto Libnah, fought against Libnah. So he's going right here. They start out here at Gibeon, and they begin to pursue down here, and they're at Makkedah. So they bury the 5 kings close to here. Then they whip Makkedah. Then they whip Libnah, and they begin to work their way to the south and west. The Lord delivered it also, the king thereof, in the hand of Israel. He smote it with the edge of the sword, and the souls that were therein, he let none remain in it. But he did unto the king thereof, as he did unto the king of Jericho. And Joshua passed from Libnah and all Israel with him to Lachish, camped against it, and fought against it. Now remember, all these people that outran the Israelites, they run back to all these cities, and they lock themselves in these cities. So one by one, Joshua's going to go and besiege each one of these cities in this nice little, and it's a valley is what it is, and so they're just going to work their way down. And the Lord delivered Lachish, verse 32, into the hand of Israel, which took it on the 2nd day, and smote it with the edge of the sword, and all the souls that were therein, according to all he had done to Libnah. Then Horam, king of Gezer, came to help Lachish, and Joshua